When are we going to have more users on dApps? Kim,
Who wants to go first?
Sure. I think of it as two big reasons. People need to have reasons to use them, and it needs to be easy to do. And I think both of those things are still in development. So why would you use a dApp? Because there's some functionality that it has that you can't get otherwise. Earning money, if it's a Blockstack app, it's about privacy. Soon we're going to have big platforms like Facebook and others that have coins built into them, and there are going to be things to do there that are just easy for people, which gets to the second point, which is it's got to be easy for people. I think we're working on the things to do, and then how easy is it is still really hard. Using today's generation of dApps just requires a bunch of steps that it's totally cool for enthusiasts, crypto enthusiasts to do, but really, really hard for sort of regular people to do. I'm really excited to see a whole ecosystem emerging right now of APIs and new ways to do wallets and so on that are going to make it just easier so people can use it without having to work too hard to do it. And then I think once that starts to happen more, you'll start to see more use cases emerge. And I think another thing that's going to happen is if the price continues to go up, more people will start buying more cryptocurrency, and then they'll be holding it. You have to have some in order to use it. And I think if we get another bull market, you'll see more people holding. And then even the things you can do today, like lend and earn in the DeFi space, once I can do that from my Coinbase account or from my Circle account, I'll start doing that too. And I think most people who are sort of normals aren't doing any of that stuff right now. So I think a lot of that's coming in the next 12 months.
So I've heard the value proposition, the infrastructure readiness, and more users. Okay. Kim, what do you see from your end?
Yeah, so I guess speaking from CryptoKitties' side, originally what we saw was we thought that users would, first learn about the blockchain, they'd get a wallet, they'd get some ETH, and then they'd come to our game. And what really happened was this crazy 17-step process where they had to learn everything else. And we at CryptoKitties actually started making videos for how to use MetaMask and where you could go and get Ether and walking users through that entire process and for them to learn about how a wallet works and what the difference is between private keys and public keys. And they were coming to us every time they lost their keys. And we lost so many users from that. And so really the last 10 months, I've been focused on Dapper, so a smart contract-based wallet to solve that exact problem. Because until we will have more interesting things to do. There's a lot more companies, big gaming companies that are coming to the space, big IP. There's going to be more interesting things to do, but it still doesn't matter if you have to go through a 17-step process. You're just going to lose. The attention span is way too small. And so it's kind of this balance of usability and security. And that's exactly what we're aiming to do with Dapper.
So you've taken all of that MetaMask difficulty and put it inside a new wallet? Is that?
Yeah, so Dapper, you can think of it as decentralization for humans. We are taking the complexities that we saw with MetaMask, with other wallets, and trying to make it as easy and simple as straightforward for users. So it's a smart contract-based wallet. So the wallet actually lives on chain. The user's in full control, but we're able to guide them through the entire process.
And from a user experience, it'll be almost as easy, I'm assuming, as downloading an app from the App Store or the Google Store?
Yeah, so right now it's in the form of an extension because most of the dApps that exist are really all of them are desktop focused. But the beauty with smart contracts is that you can have that accessibility across all of your apps. So you can log into the exact same account, and we have what is known as a device key associated with that. So we're working on Android. That will be coming out at the end of June, and then close to that we'll have iOS.
And that's what's going to allow you to go into, because your vision was to have millions of users.
Absolutely.
Users.
Absolutely. And I think really we have a whole panel of experts here, but I think there's really three things that you need in order to see a mainstream adoption, and that's interesting things to do, an easy on-ramp, and then scalability.
Okay. Let's move to Evan.
Yeah, so I disagree a little bit that we should be worried about DAUs or MAUs or whatever. Like if you think about the early web, like what people were talking about, like valuation metrics in the dot-com boom was eyeballs, right? So hits and page views. And then in Web 2, we got into DAUs and whatnot. But it's not even clear that that's the way we should measure in Web 3 now. So there might be some things that it might be more applicable for, but I think we might actually be, since Web 3 is more about like the native value transfer layer, it may actually be something more like the actual metric that ends up being used. Maybe not for everyone, but the predominant one will be something more like, value locked up or value in play. And you might even see that in some games too. Like that might be the way that people start measuring things is like, is the special sword that you have to play 87 levels for, is that, worth $400? And how many people hold those and get there? And that's like the how you view a successful game.
Arianna, what are you seeing on your end?
I think it really depends what category you're looking at. I think the incentive to make money is a really strong one. And so I think that class of applications will actually start to bring a lot of people into the fold, as Nick mentioned. I think the desire to like earn yield on your assets or to trade or to kind of speculate, but particularly trading, this idea of maintaining control of your keys is obviously pretty important as we continue to see more and more hacks. So I think that whole financial class of dApps is pretty interesting, and I think that's going to be one of the waves that we see a lot as the market starts to pick up again.
Do you have any examples? Sorry. Go ahead.
You mentioned the three things, like things to do, easy to use, easy on ramp, and scalability. And it's interesting to even think about whether scalability is the bottleneck to user growth right now. I mean, you could probably argue it either way, but I actually think the easy to use is probably the biggest hurdle at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just the fact that you have to download MetaMask to use some of these things is that is way above most people's pay grade. I mean, some of this stuff, I've been in this space for 6 years and I'm still like, what am I doing? So I think it is a real challenge, but I think people are starting to build better and better experiences. Obviously Dapper, many others. Like I think Dharma's doing great work on the usability front in the credit and lending space. And so a lot of progress is being made. Sometimes, there's just always a bit of a lag between when people build things and when, they start to get used. But I think we're just going to continue to see improvements on that front.
When I think about like the magical user experiences that can be invented in crypto land that haven't been invented yet, aside from the whole money part, that the idea that it's just open protocols that just work, what you can ship an app with tokens in it, you can ship a browser with tokens in it, and you can start, in a world where this is fully deployed, you could start using web services just because your browser has a wallet with tokens in it, and you don't have to sign up for a credit card, you don't have to sign up for an account. I think there's going to be a whole category of magical apps because it just works. But we need to have, in order for that to work, we need to have browsers that come with crypto wallets built into them, right? And we don't even have that yet. And then, so I think we're really on the cusp of all that. And right now the conversation's a little bit about why can't the current user experience be better? But I actually think there's a user experience of the future that is not just as good as the Web 2 user experience, but like really better because of the potential for it to just work.
Yeah, I think as you start to move into more like smart contract to smart contract interactions, then you eliminate a lot of the friction that you have in the current web. And so that's what allows for kind of the seamless experience that I think you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think right now we're starting to see that people are focused way too much on what are the technical constraints holding us back rather than pushing usability. It's insane to me how little UX designers I see in this space.
But when we're saying smart contract, we shouldn't even be saying that, because for the average user, it doesn't mean anything. The smart contract is inside. Maybe it does the magic. And this is our language, but when you have your next generation wallet, for example, it's going to be a platform for something beyond CryptoKitties. Can you talk about what's coming next? After CryptoKitties, there's been some teasers something called Cheese Wizard. Can you talk about Cheese Wizard or say something about that?
Yeah, I can say that we have a meetup tonight. There's an NFT meetup in Bushwick. Definitely come by and check it out. And tomorrow there will be some pretty big.
What is it? You've been teasing the world about it.
Cheese Wizards is our next game.
That's it.
It is very different than CryptoKitties. Very different approach. Our artists are amazing, and it's cheesy. It's very different.
That's a big tease about cheese.
We always like to excite. I think that's the biggest thing with blockchain is that we get so wrapped up in the theoretical of what could happen, and we really need to remember that people need to experience these things in order for them to actually believe in it. And so with CryptoKitties, with Dapper, we're all about creating that excitement and providing that experience for people, because only when people actually experience something and it shows them delight or hope, will they actually start believing in the technology.
Do you all agree with what Evan was saying, that the monthly active users are not going to be necessarily the main metric? I mean, I understand with wallets,
Yes.
yeah, you want the size of the wallet because you don't use it every day. You want a big bank account. You don't go to the bank every day. But that doesn't apply for everything, does it? I mean, what do you think?
I think, of course, we're going to get new metrics as this space matures. And
Yes.
I think it's going to depend on the ecosystem. So right now in DeFi, the amount that's locked up in these contracts is like a very good metric of interest and growth. Other systems might be measured better by just throughput and number of transactions. I think, who knows? But the cool thing is that all of this is visible in the public on blockchains. Like, imagine in the growth of Web 2, everybody could see Twitter's DAUs and Facebook's DAUs, in all of for everybody to see, and you could decide if you were a developer building on this platform or that platform, like deep into the actual functioning of the system. You can do that here. I think that's awesome. And for sure, we're going to have different metrics here that are going to focus more on the monetary aspects. It's already happening. Makes sense.
We talked about decentralized companies going after centralized incumbents this morning in one of the panels. Do you think that the dApps of the future necessarily have to attack somebody that is already an incumbent, or is it going to be more about something new that didn't exist before, something more native? Is the hope more that that's what's going to grow? Like CK, CryptoKitties is very, very native. DeFi is very native. But the list is short. There aren't a lot of examples like that.
Well, I think you also have to consider what the timeline is, and Ethereum didn't even exist a few years ago, and so oftentimes the apps need what was built before in order to say, okay, now we can build it slightly better, and you learn from what other projects are doing. So, I mean, the fact that basically, to Nick's point, now there's over $500 million of ETH value locked in the DeFi ecosystem, and this entire ecosystem literally did not exist 2 years ago, is an insane rate of growth. It's 8,000% or something absurd like that. So it's actually growing really fast, I would argue. It's just, not as fast as we might think, I guess you could say, but in truth be told, I actually think it's moving really quickly.
So I'm not sure I have a huge opinion on whether it comes from disrupting incumbents. I mean, I could see incumbents sort of disrupting themselves, right? Imagine a social network that has value transfer native to it, maybe even Cent, something like Cent, which is growing like crazy, by the way. But it also does a pretty good job of abstracting away private keys. So you could actually imagine. Everybody's been wondering for years why Facebook hasn't done payments. Now it looks like they might actually do payments with a crypto buzzword involved. But any sort of social network that decides to do that, even if they hold the private key or do some sort of tricks or Starkey math magic in order to enable privacy. But if you had that built in, you could definitely see that very quickly disrupting, some of the incumbent social networks.
I think if you look back at the first wave of the internet, there was some weird stuff happening in the corner that had never been done before, new. And then there was a second phase of, let's just take all the existing things we have, put them online, and that wasn't really right. And then the third phase was, okay, now we understand this better. We can build sort of more purely new things that take advantage of the new properties of the internet and apply them to, existing industries. So it's sort of like the early internet, and then like moving newspapers online, and then Uber. And who knows if it'll be exactly like that, but it feels like that's likely to happen here, where you're not going to go straight from where we are today to a literal, one-to-one undermining of existing models in the same way. But I think if you look at in the long run, we have the potential to invert a lot of business models and tokenize a lot of things that will really challenge a lot of industries. But I think it's going to take us a lot of exploring to get there.
Yeah, I think we need to stop taking existing business models and just say that we're going to decentralize them. We need to start thinking of new models that can come from this. I don't think anybody realized how much the internet would change our communication styles. And I think blockchain can do for value transfer what the internet did for communication.
And do you think that a large-scale dApp would need its own blockchain, or that we hope that it could run on maybe a larger scale Ethereum, or is it going to run on a Cosmos style or Polkadot, or is that going to be totally irrelevant at the infrastructure level?
Well, I'm pretty bullish on layer 2 on Ethereum, and one of the greatest things about it, which is, stuff is shipping, is already shipped, and is going to be shipping in the next few months, and definitely in this year, is state channels and Plasma, which have sort of different use cases, although they are layer 2, so they're sort of similar. But they will help fix the stick around and wait 15 seconds and worry about your gas costs. They'll also, to some degree, fix privacy. So I'm really bullish on both those things too.
I am too, but
possible.
You could argue that not all dApps need an Ethereum. I mean, arguably, a CryptoKitties may not need an Ethereum going forward. I'm not sure. So how do you think the future is going to interplay with all these blockchains?
I think the next 18 months are going to be really interesting to see the battle between network effects built on top of existing chains.
Yeah.
So protocols and assets, layering on Ethereum, the security network effect in Bitcoin versus new low-level platforms launching with different properties. And we're going to see if those serve other use cases in meaningfully interesting ways, or not. So I really don't have an answer, but I think we're going to. That's the question for me, is where the new features come from, and for the existing change, how strong is the stability network effect and the sort of long-term network effect? So far, it seems pretty strong.
I mean, for developers, tooling isn't really there for anything but Ethereum right now. I mean, maybe it'll be there in years, but at that point, where will Ethereum be? Will the scalability and privacy be solved by then? I think right now Ethereum has such a huge, developers tend to go where other developers are because that's where they can find tools and they can find, users as well. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think Ethereum certainly has more challengers than, say, Bitcoin does, but I'm still waiting for anyone to actually launch and have a functioning chain. So I am slow to write off Ethereum because, first of all, I think community is a real moat that is often underestimated. And so even if you have a chain that works from a technical perspective, that doesn't automatically mean that, all of a sudden it's going to get all this usage. I think the build it and they will come has been shown time and time again in the history of technology to not actually really work. And so, right now, I think Ethereum has a significant lead in terms of community. And so, it's anybody's guess who and when is going to be able to kind of supplant them for certain use cases at least. And I think we may end up with, a multi-chain world in which certain blockchains are used for gaming. Other Ethereum might be used for DeFi. And so if the interoperability layer actually works in the way that folks are hoping it does, then that may be fine. It may be a seamless transaction across chains. And so that ends up not being a real problem.
The other thing that we haven't really seen fully yet is for the mass market of developers to come into this space yet. So the same way that we're always saying, oh, the Wall Street money is about to come in, I think there's a little bit of the idea of like the mainstream developers are about to come in too, and I think the mainstream developers aren't here yet. And I think they're going to come over the next 12 months, and that's why I think it's so important that we build SDKs and APIs and all these layers that are going to make it possible not just for someone more hardcore to build in the guts of these systems, but for everybody else who's building apps to build on top. So I'm excited about that.
So since we're talking about dApps, there's another variable here today, is that today we go to the App Store or we go to the Google Play to find the apps that we know about. In the future with the dApps, do you think there will be an equivalent to that? Because right now the current app stores are not very friendly to the crypto apps and dApps. They want to tax it or they want to reject it, and they don't make it easy. So will there be another kind of decentralized app store of the sort? And there's a bit of a dichotomy here because it's like the opposite of decentralization. So we have a bunch of dApps, and decentralization creates an interesting challenge, which is you cannot search very well. It creates a searching, you cannot find, Evan, you've done a great job at coalescing every week all of the news about Ethereum.
Centralizing.
But you told me recently it's becoming more and more difficult. When you started a year ago, it was easier. And now you're even missing stuff because it's all over the place. And this is just a microcosm of what might happen when we have hundreds and thousands and millions of decentralized dApps eventually. So how do you think this is going to play out?
So I think about that as being the question of how much value gets captured at the wallet level and who gets there, because I think that becomes, essentially like they're going to hold the app store, and that also sort of like is identity as well, right?
Totally.
We see exchanges buying wallets, and it's not actually that expensive to start a wallet, like to start developing one if you're a good developer. But all of those ultimately are customer acquisition plays, and I personally find them very interesting, but you got to be good at acquiring customers.
Well, I think that the interesting thing you said is like wallet is identity is app store in this world, which is kind of wild. The other thing, and so that's why I like the HTC Exodus phone so much, the idea that there's going to be a crypto native phone that's going to start with the first principle of sort of crypto as identity, as money, and as apps. Also, I don't know if you guys, any paid attention to this, but Apple's monopoly on the iOS App Store just got tested in the Supreme Court, and that's going to get tried as a class action. And I think it's not crazy that Apple might not be the only app store on the iOS platform at some point in the future too. But I think the first point is the more interesting one.
Would it be nice if instead of in the future us going to these stores, the store's going to come to us, kind of expanding on your concept of wallets and ID. And by default, you have a decentralized app. It already is connected to the network by default. It's peer-to-peer, and it's like it becomes a pull instead of a push. Us going and visiting, it comes to us instead.
Although I don't know that I want push notifications from all dApps.
Within certain parameters.
I think that it'll be interesting to see, because I think right now a lot of people are thinking about it like, oh, let's replicate the existing browsing experience, but for crypto. And I think, again, like to the earlier point about like, not just let's replicate it, but let's actually think how we can do this better in a native experience. And I think we saw the same thing emerge with like new business models for the internet. At the beginning, it was like, let's take what we're doing in the physical world and put it online. And now there's a lot of other models that have been created. And so I think we'll start to see some of that in crypto for things like searching for dApps as well.
Okay. We could take one question, perhaps, maybe two in the audience, if there are any. How many of you are users of dApps on a regular basis? Okay, there are a few hands. That's good.
For the rest of you, why aren't you?
The mic,
Yeah,
can you,
hi.
the mic?
I have a mic.
Oh, can you speak to the
So
mic?
it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear DAUs and ease of use, but nobody talks about marketing. And
About market, yeah.
I find it amazing that nobody in this space ever talks about actually understanding the process of marketing, not just promotion, but actually understanding how to enter a market, how to go to market, how to shape a market, how to bring users to applications. These are things that actually are not rocket science. And the fact that nobody even mentions it the whole day, that's actually the more amazing omission, frankly, than anything else.
Good point.
So I think the reason there is that a lot, I mean, like CryptoKitties is sort of the exception. Like people were willing to like jump through all sorts of crazy hoops to go buy their kitties, right? But for other people, like there is a huge drop off in the funnel as soon as you ask them to like install MetaMask. So like marketing beyond just the hardcore people right now who already have MetaMask installed is pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the product side. But I think, yeah, I totally agree to Evan's point. Like, you'd get such a dramatic drop-off. Also, certain channels are not available. Like, Facebook didn't allow you couldn't advertise any crypto stuff until, like, now that they're entering the space, they're like, oh, it's okay. Google had, like, a lot of traditional channels were actually not allowed to market for crypto.
Yeah, and
So
that-
what channels would you suggest? But again, then you get the mainstream media and they have to install MetaMask. Like, you've lost.
The point is, there are lots of obfuscations here. And the reality seems to be that nobody wants to actually think about the actual characteristics of the markets. You only want to talk about the products. Even your explanations right now are product-based. You're not actually talking about empathy for markets, empathy for users. And the empathy isn't only UX and UI. The empathy is actually understanding how to communicate in language that the users want to hear. Because there's a customer user benefit.
I would say we're bleeding edge and we're like building the tools to make it so that it makes sense to go out and spend money on customer acquisition.
The longest diffusion process with the least results.
Wait, what was that?
sorry. Yeah.
Longest diffusion process with the least results.
I think the parts of the market that are the most mature have the most mature marketing. So the exchanges have the best marketing, and the dApps have the worst marketing. So, but point taken, yeah.
I'm going to do same shameless self-promotion here. For Dapper, I don't know if you've seen the ads that have been going around here. We have an amazing creative team who've been able to kind of put that together and take something as, quite frankly, as boring as a wallet and make that more interesting. And so I think that we do need to have that excitement. It's the same thing we're trying to do with Cheese Wizards and make it exciting. Marketing for us for CryptoKitties in the beginning was so difficult. Again, with Facebook, we got shut. We couldn't do anything. So it's really coming back to the community and trying to grow that community. But until we start to see more mainstream audiences, or mainstream media, as someone mentioned, and coming up with new, exciting ways to market them, then of course, marketing is absolutely important. But yes.
One last question, and that's it. We have to wrap up. I think.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Quick.
I've advised many different blockchain companies and how to go to market, and the biggest challenge is for me to get them to spend money on marketing. Absolutely, 100%. You're right.
Thank you. Great. So on this note, I think we're out of time. We could have gone longer. Thanks again for the panel.